So don't you just love the story of Jesus healing that blind man? It's the only healing miracle where Jesus doesn't get it right the first time and has to try a second time. What's up with that? After he puts saliva on the man's eyes, he says, "Can you see anything?" And the man says, "Well, I can see people, but they look like trees walking." So Jesus touches his eyes again and looks intently at him, and the man sees everything clearly. What's interesting is that in chapter 10 of Mark, which we'll read 3 Sundays from now, it has the story of a healing of another blind man, blind Bartimaeus. And the two stories of the healing of someone blind really function as bookends. And in between those two bookends of healing of blind people, you have Jesus talking about what it means to be the Messiah and what it means to be a follower of the Messiah. So why does Mark tell the story of the blind man in this way? This isn't simply a healing story like all the other healing stories. This is Mark's way of asking us, do you see clearly who Jesus is? Or do you need to have your vision adjusted? So let me ask you, who is Jesus? Well, when Jesus asks his disciples that question, who do you say that I am? Peter answers correctly. He says, "You are the Messiah." And he's picturing wonderful things, glory and honor and power and everything great, and God's reign and kingdom and all its glory, and healing and miracles and raising the dead. And then Jesus says that the Messiah is to undergo great suffering, be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. And that's when Peter gets angry and upset. That's not his vision of what the Messiah is all about. That's not what he thinks Jesus is all about. But Peter's not seeing clearly. He needs his vision adjusted. It's like seeing people, but they look like trees walking. And then Jesus goes on to talk about what it means not only to be the Messiah, which is service and suffering and death, but also what it means to be a disciple and follower of the Messiah. And listen to the words Jesus uses. He says, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me." And Jesus is not talking about everybody's got problems, everybody has their cross to bear. He's talking about taking up Jesus' cross of service. And then he goes on. He says, "For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it," which is all about service again. And you just know that Peter and the disciples don't like what Jesus is saying because it's hard, it isn't easy, and it goes against all our natural instincts. But 6 days later, as Jesus takes Peter and James and John up the mountain for the transfiguration, God speaks from the heavens and says, "This is my Son, the beloved. Listen to him." You see, the transfiguration story is a theophany. It's an appearance of God. And whenever God appears and says something, it's of great importance. And what God says is listen to him. Listen to Jesus. So, do you see it? Do you see clearly what Jesus is saying? Or are you looking at people and they look like they're trees walking? You see, somehow we have turned faith and discipleship into simply what's in it for me and going to heaven and being forgiven and having God's help and strength and comfort. Now, while all those things are true and a part of our faith, it's not the complete picture. We're not seeing clearly. Being a disciple or a follower of Jesus, the one who is the Messiah, the one who suffers, the one who serves, means that our lives are about serving, and that we find our life by losing it in service to something greater than ourselves and doing it in imitation of Jesus. We have a welcome statement here at ULC, and we've actually had a form of this welcome statement since about 2001. And I want to read it for you. In response to the call in Romans 15:7, welcome one another, therefore, as Christ has welcomed you for the glory of God, we believe that every person has worth as an individual, and every person is entitled to dignity and respect. We therefore publicly proclaim that we welcome people of any race, nationality, age, ability, sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression into the membership of our church. And we encourage everyone to share their faith, gifts, and talents in worship, service, study, and leadership. We commit to remove all barriers that exclude people from full and active participation in our church, and we will continually strive to eliminate prejudice from our thoughts and actions and discourage prejudice by others at every opportunity. In essence, that welcome statement is saying what Jesus is saying in the gospel reading, that to be a follower of the one who is the Messiah is to live a life of service, welcoming, including, and serving all people, even to the point of dying to self and our own self-interest. But the problem is, like Jesus' disciples, we generally don't get it, and we don't see clearly. We want faith to be about us. We want it to be about what's good for us and about being comfortable and happy and well taken care of. And we're like the blind man of Bethsaida. We see people, but they look like trees walking. To see clearly is to realize that it's about following Jesus in a life of love and service. At our council and lead management retreat that we had at the end of January at Brody Hall, we spent time thinking about our congregation's future directions and setting some goals for this year. And when you get your March edition of the Lux a little later this week, please take time to read our president, Aaron Frisch's article, because it lists those goals and that the council came up with. And I think those goals are really good and challenging and helpful goals. But the goal that really connects with today's gospel reading and the welcome statement is the goal that reads, identify 2 barriers and work to remove them. Remember the statement in the welcome statement that goes, we commit to remove all barriers that exclude people from full and active participation in our church. So as a council and lead management, we want to take some time to identify, to discern what barriers there are that might be a barrier for people, and identify 2 of them, and then do whatever we need to do to remove 2 of those barriers. Now, I have no idea what barriers that we'll identify, but I do know that it won't be easy, because we often don't see the barriers because we've created them, or we're blind to them, or the barriers benefit us. And sometimes removing barriers means removing and eliminating something that is sacred or special or meaningful. But that's all part of dying to self for the sake of others, for the sake of the gospel, and all a part of seeing Jesus clearly and listening to him. So, how is your vision these days? Do you see clearly who Jesus is? Do you understand what it means to follow Jesus, the Messiah? As we come down from the mountain and head into Lent, I pray that our eyes will be opened, that we'll see clearly, and that we'll listen to Jesus. Amen.